talk of a political dirt unit.
Typical.
We're on.
Hello.
How are you finding the journey so far?
Enlightening, illuminating, one might say. I feel like we're on the path to discovering knowledge and uncovering the truth of our history.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of it, and it's pretty interesting the way it all sort of flows, you know, and builds on each other. And I guess we're at the inevitable point now where just through sort of this quest for like hidden knowledge, she's created these secret societies.
Yeah.
Who have then operated in secret for a long time. They know secrets, and then we're at the point now where they're like, all right, well, let's just fucking, you know, case this joint.
There's the thing. I mean, it's weirder than I would like. Like, I'm a rationalist, you know. I like things nice and you know, clean and simple and empirical and all that. I don't like this weird shit. But it makes sense, really. Like when you think about, you know, these groups doing this stuff, like it's people doing things. It's going to have an effect on stuff, and it's good to know what that is.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and and I guess what is the central, like, underlying thing that is sort of like keeping this whole occult underground alive and moving is the quest to transmute lead into gold.
Those alchemists.
Yeah, this is the quest. This goes back millennia. This is, you know, someone gets enough power and all of a sudden, and money, and all of a sudden they want to find someone who can transform base metals into the most valuable metals on the planet.
Where did they even get the idea for that? You know, like, because this is before we had the theory of the structure of the atom and all that. Like, we didn't know how electrons and protons and neutrons worked. Like, what made them think that they could even do that?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
That's why I'm here.
The quest to transmute lead into gold began in the labs of Hellenistic Egypt. Zosimos of Panopolis documented the I practiced this word a bunch of times. And the Chrysopoeia, P-O-E-I-A, Chrysopoeia, the manufacture of gold. He established the metallurgical foundation for alchemy.
What do you mean manufacture of gold, though? How does that...
Well, he defined this transmutation of base metals into noble metals as the physical manifestation of spiritual purification. And this knowledge moved into the Islamic world during the 8th century with Jabir ibn Hayyan, you know, the guy that we spoke about on the first installment in this, that you know, basically created like chemistry.
Yeah.
He formalized the mercury sulfur theory. He proposed that all metals were composed of these two primary elements in varying proportions.
Mercury and sulfur.
Yeah. And by utilizing a catalyst known as the elixir, an operator could theoretically rearrange the elemental ratio of lead to produce gold.
They're pretty dangerous elements, aren't they, those two?
Yes. Yes. In 1382, a French scribe called Nicolas Flamel is alleged to have achieved the first recorded transmutation of lead into gold.
Have we heard of him before, or have I just heard of him before?
No, I haven't heard of him before until I wrote him into here.
Okay. Is he playing around with nitrogen, or is that someone else?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Carry on, sorry.
He claimed to have decoded a 21-page manuscript titled The Book of Abraham the Jew. And following claiming to have decoded this, his wealth increased to an extent that allowed him to personally fund the construction of 14 hospitals, 3 chapels, and 7 churches in Paris. And this is recorded. You know, these endowments are documented in the records, Paris municipal records. And by the 17th century, the rumor of him being able to do this evolved into the belief that Flamel had also discovered the elixir of life and remained alive in the East. Familiar story. European monarchs identified the alchemist not specifically that guy, but just like alchemists in general, as a strategic military and economic asset. If they had the ability to manufacture gold, they would have total sovereign credit and the power to bypass international trade barriers.
Well, no, because then it loses its value. If all of a sudden, if gold is no longer okay, but leaving that aside, leaving the realities of economics aside, sure.
Yeah.
If they don't tell anyone, if they don't tell anyone about
exactly. It would have to be a secret. In the 14th century, like parallel to, I guess, this guy in France, King Edward III of England issued commissions to alchemists to finance his continental wars, or in the hope of financing his continental wars. In the 16th century, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II transformed Prague into the alchemical capital of the world. He provided labs and salaries to hundreds of adepts, demanding the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone.
Do we have any idea what they're doing in these labs? Are they just like boiling shit and seeing what happens?
Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. I mean, it's never specific. Like it's never, even the Saint Germain stuff. No one ever.
We don't get to see inside the labs.
It's like, he gave him an industrial size fucking alchemical lab. And it's like, well, what did he do in that for 10 years? You know?
Beakers bubbling away and mixing shit together.
And
maybe some magnets involved, I imagine.
Yeah, probably a bunch of magnets.
But again, this is before we have. Well, actually, that's worth finding out. When do we get the theory of the atom? You know what I mean?
Look it up. I'm not sure, but we can look that up.
Yeah. So John Dalton in the 1803.
Yeah, 1803, 1808. Yeah.
And we're before then. So
yes.
What are they? Still confused what they're trying to do.
But they've got I guess it's all sort of coming off the Subir Ibn Hayyan and his alchemical work in the 8th century.
Yeah, but what was that?
Well, it was like, he thought that it was like a spiritual thing, and he was viewing it. And then it all comes from the Hermetic text. It's a Hermetic, it's Egyptian stuff that was going around Alexandria in the 3rd century. Leftover stuff from the golden age of ancient Egypt and ancient Greece.
I guess they probably got excited by bronze and stuff. You know that idea how you get tin and what's bronze made of? Tin and something else?
Yeah, well, it was the Bronze Age, so that was a thing they were doing. Yeah,
I feel like that's probably a big part of where it kind of came from. Like this idea, we can create stuff. If we can do that, then surely we can make gold as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What is bronze? Tins and something else? Tin and copper. Yeah,
tin and copper. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but you gotta know how to cook it. So I think
just like gold is lead and mercury and fucking.
But you know what I mean? I think that's probably the impulse, or it comes from that kind of.
And so gold.
Spot.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. It's been a while since I read about gold, but gold wasn't created through a process, was it? It's just always been here. It's part of what made up the earth.
Yes, gold is a single atom.
Yeah.
Whereas bronze is called an alloy. That's a combination of two different. Yeah.
So in 1602, a man known as Alexander Seton, or the Cosmopolite, he conducted a series of public transmutations across Europe. In the presence of chemist Jacob Zwinger in Basel, Seton reportedly transformed a lead plate into gold using a small amount of sulfur-colored powder.
He fucking didn't.
In 1603, he performed a similar demonstration for the Elector of Saxony, Christian II. The Elector subsequently imprisoned and tortured Seton to extract the location of his tincture. And Seton died in 1604 without disclosing the secret.
It's full of shit.
Yeah. In 1677, an Augustinian monk named Wenzel Seiler performed a transmutation in the presence of Emperor Leopold I in Vienna. Seton took a large medallion made of a silver lead alloy, and dipped it into a liquid tincture. The portion of the medallion that came into contact with the liquid appeared to transform into pure gold. This artifact, known as the Leopold medallion, remained in the collection of a museum in Vienna.
Do you know what happened there?
No, but it's been tested in modern times, and it's confirmed that it is an alloy, so it's not gold. But having that in this museum since 16, that is what kept the flame going. That is what made people believe that it is possible and keep shoveling money into it.
So he basically just like dipped it in yellow paint or something.
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure. I'm not sure if the if it was transformed all the way through or if it was just the external.
Yeah.
But you'd think they'd be smarter than
they probably cut it open and have a look.
Yeah. This obsession, though, persisted into the scientific revolution. Isaac Newton was obsessed with alchemical experimentation. He sought the universal solvent and the central fire. He believed that the secrets of the universe were encoded in the ancient alchemical texts, and the transmutation of lead was a fundamental chemical process. By the 18th century, the Royal Society in London and the French Academy of Sciences were frequently approached by adepts claiming to possess this power. In 1782, James Price, a fellow of the Royal Society, claimed he could transform mercury into silver or gold. He performed the demonstrations for various peers and scientists. But when the Royal Society demanded a formal demonstration under strict lab conditions, Price committed suicide by drinking cyanide in his lab.
What? Jesus Christ, a bit dramatic. Okay.
But my point here is that for 2 millennia, the elite of every major civilization pursued this skill. Men burnt through fortunes, inhaled toxic vapors, and risked execution by the state to master this secret. The reported success stories, though never sufficiently providing 100% proof, dangled the carrot just low enough to keep enticing the richest and most powerful figures to continue pouring money into this quest, and as a result, keeping this esoteric underground very well-funded and free to explore any other occult sciences they choose.
You know what they say about fools and their money.
Now, last time, we looked at one particular alchemist, the, as it turns out, not so mysterious Count of Saint Germain, and the groups he was affiliated with, the Illuminati, the Freemasonic Templar Rite of Strict Observance, and the Asiatic Brethren, and then how all that flowed into the French Revolution. Now, continuing on our timeline, moving into the 19th century, we look at their influence. But first, we need to understand the new ideas gaining traction parallel to the revolutionary current in Europe. They were still chasing the gold, but the occult world received a few upgrades in the late 18th century. Firstly, we have tarot cards. Tarot originated in 15th century Italy as a trick-taking parlor game. And for 300 years, the 78-card deck possessed no inherent esoteric significance. Then in 1781, Antoine Court de Gebelin, a French Freemason and Protestant clergyman, he published the 8th volume of his encyclopedia Le Monde Primitif. He made the wild claim that the tarot deck was the Book of Thoth, a surviving Egyptian text containing the secret science of the ancient world. He claimed the priests of Egypt deliberately disguised this knowledge as a game to ensure its survival through the collapse of their civilization. And then between the years 1783 and 1785, so 2 years after that, a French occultist named Jean-Baptiste Alliot published a multi-volume manual on tarot divination under the alias Etaila, or Etaila. It's his surname backwards.
What was that first guy's name again, sorry?
The first guy was Court de Gebelin, or Gebelin.
Court?
Antoine Court de Gebelin. Gebelin? I don't know. I don't really know how to pronounce French.
Uh-huh.
If you
and he made the connection between the tarot and the Book of Thoth.
Yeah, he claimed that it was the Book of Thoth.
Uh-huh.
And then, so carrying on from that, this guy, Jean-Baptiste Alliot, he published a manual on tarot divination. He attributed astrological correlations, elemental properties, and divinatory meanings to each individual card.
And these are just two random guys? They're not from the Illuminati or whatever?
Well, they're part of this, like, Freemasonic, like, esoteric, underground.
So they are?
They absolutely are, yeah. But, 1783, 1785, they probably weren't part of the Illuminati at that point. But there's a fair chance they were, running in those same circles that
exactly, yeah,
became that, yeah. He designed the first tarot deck specifically for occult use, and he founded a society called the Society of Interpreters of the Book of Thoth to teach his methodology. By the early decades of the 19th century, the esoteric underground had entirely adopted the tarot. The lodges utilized the deck as a pictorial map of Hermetic philosophy and provided initiates with a visual modular system to categorize psychological archetypes, spiritual laws, and the hidden forces of nature. You had any experience with tarot cards?
Not personally directly, I don't think. No. Is it are they just like future tellers? Is that or do they have a purpose beyond that? No.
So it's not like it's I don't think anyone really goes into like pulls a tarot card thinking it's magic. But it is like good advice. And if you're trying to make a decision or you're sort of stuck with something or whatever, it's a good little push in a direction. And it can be like sometimes very specific to like it's a slippery one.
So it's not telling you what's going to happen in the future.
No, it's like, in that sort of fortune teller way of like it's quite ambiguous. But it's like, I mean, like I said at the I think it was the second sort of installment of this thing where I broke down the different categories of magic. This is divination, which is sort of basically it's like injecting randomness into a situation to sort of help you get a fresh perspective on something.
Sure.
I
may have said this before, but we're reading the Book of Dust at the moment by Philip Pullman. You know Philip Pullman?
No, I do not.
It's the Book of Dust trilogy, which is the second trilogy after his Dark Materials. So it starts with Northern Lights, or AKA the Golden Compass, the Subtle Knife, and the Amber Spyglass. That's his Dark Materials. And then there's the second trilogy, which is the Book of Dust trilogy, which starts with La Belle Sauvage, the Secret Commonwealth, and now we're reading the final one, which is the Rosefield. Anyway, it deals with this. It's like a fantasy sort of thing set in like a slightly parallel universe, but it deals with this the idea of this substance which they call dust, which is kind of like a conscious particle thing which kind of permeates through the universe, and it can be sort of harnessed and divined. And they have this tool called an alethiometer, which looks like a compass. So that's why it's called the Golden Compass, because it's made of gold, and it's got like these 3 arms and all these different symbols and stuff. And apparently, if you hold it and use it sort of intuitively, and you ask it questions, then the arms will point to something, and like it'll give you the answer, so it can tell you the truth about things. That's an alethiometer,
right?
It's a really beautiful concept, and it's really exquisitely illustrated. It's a wonderful book, beautiful writing, the whole thing. It's actually similar to tarot, I think, and that's actually come up recently in a recent chapter that we read, where it's like she's lost the alethiometer. No spoilers, sorry, but she's trying to figure this out, and she sees someone using tarot, and she goes, "Oh, that's like a similar thing to what I'm doing." It's like this, tapping into this invisible force of consciousness which is somehow surrounding us. It's a beautiful concept, and it's good philosophy.
Well, highly recommend. There's a Chinese
the Tai Chao or whatever, the Tai Ching maybe. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, I don't have any personal experience with tarot, and I don't really know much about it. I guess I thought it was going to tell you if you're going to die in a hot air balloon or something like that.
No, it'll be like well, I mean, they're different. There's a whole system. Like later on, the Golden Dawn kind of like refined it sort of further, and Aleister Crowley and stuff, and they'll sort of come up with their own decks and gets like very specific.
All right, so we've got these Frenchies who've connected tarot to Thoth.
So yes, and
late 1700s.
That is right.
Okay.
And now, the Count of Saint Germain and his protege, Count Alessandro Cagliostro, were up there with the most prolific occultists of the 1700s. But there were others just as prolific and impactful as them in different ways. One of those people was Emanuel Swedenborg from Sweden. Swedenborg was not a fringe lunatic. He was amongst the peak of the European scientific establishment. He was a metallurgist, an anatomist who essentially discovered the function of the cerebral cortex, and a nobleman working for the Swedish Board of Mines. But
it's nice when you got biologists and chemists, you know what I mean? Like these days, those are kind of separate things, but back then someone could do the cerebral cortex and metallurgy.
Some guy with a noble title is just like becomes the authority on something he read a book about once.
They were the only people who could afford to. That's what the Royal Society was. There was aristocrats who could afford to spend all day picking up rocks.
But in the 1740s, Swedenborg had a breakthrough. Rather than using the traditional tools for this, like kaikion or hashish or datura, he developed a system of intense hypnagogic breathing techniques, essentially a proto-version of holotropic breathwork or tantric pranayama. Exactly. And he realized that by manually suppressing his respiratory system, he could shut down his autonomic nervous system, bypass the ego, and induce massive, sustained trance states.
Jeez, all right.
In 1758, Swedenborg published a book titled Earths in the Universe. He claimed that through astral projection, he had literally traveled the solar system and conversed with the inhabitants of Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn.
Oh, he just had a head spin.
But his most significant interaction was on Venus. Swedenborg dedicated a whole section of the text to his visitation to the morning star. He claimed the planet was populated by two distinct races. One was giant, savage, and stupid, while the other was gentle, highly intellectual, and angelic.
Mm-hmm.
Swedenborg became a rock star amongst the Western spiritualists.
Thereby, that encourages him. Once he becomes a rock star, then he goes, I can get more out of telling these stories.
Well, he was
no time for these charlatans.
I mean, you know, I don't think what he was actually doing was conversing with the actual inhabitants of Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, or Venus. But obviously he was having, he was putting himself into a proper, breakthrough psychedelic trip, and he was taking information back and publishing it. And,
so you think he was being sincere? I
think he was being sincere. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And he became the undisputed godfather of Western spiritualism. He laid the foundations of the possibility that the ether wasn't just a waiting room filled with dead relatives. It was an active interdimensional database populated by extraterrestrial intelligences that could be contacted if you knew how to tune your brainwaves. Now, he didn't. This is why I think was actually serious, because he didn't try and start a cult or a secret society. But his writings were massive within these occult circles. By the 1760s and 1770s, his text was circulating within the highest tiers of European Freemasonry. And whole occult lodges, such as the Illuminés of Avignon in France, they formed specifically to study his methods of astral communication.
Still just breath work?
Yeah. Probably the most interesting thing I could find about his whole thing is that in 1761, Queen Lovisa Ulrika of Sweden challenged Swedenborg to prove his abilities.
Mm-hmm. Good on her.
Good on her. So he entered a trance. He contacted her recently deceased brother, the Prince of Prussia, and he returned with a secret message that only the Queen and her brother knew. The Queen was actually terrified, but admitted that his techniques were valid. But the point is that through doing these exercises, Swedenborg dragged the concept of non-human contact out of the ancient mythos and presented it as a replicable science to the 18th century European establishment.
Do we have any ideas on how he tricked the Queen?
No idea.
Do we think he actually talked to her dead brother?
Well, I mean, he had a secret message that only the Queen and her brother knew. And
so he was a private detective.
Yeah.
He was a private detective.
Blavatsky did similar things, but it came undone because there was other people in it. You know, she had people who got the information for her who then talked about it, you know, whereas there wasn't any of that for this guy.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Private detective.
and what was it, like a molecular biologist or whatever? And, neuroscientist.
Yeah.
A metallurgist, that's right, and an anatomist.
Yes, an anatomist and a metallurgist and
sat on the board
PI.
of mines and a private detective in his spare time. And then the other guy, the other all-star, the round out the all-stars of the 1700s, we have Franz Anton Mesmer. Franz Anton Mesmer published his theory of animal magnetism in 1779. He claimed an invisible fluid permeated the universe and connected all living things. According to his doctrine, physical and mental diseases were caused by obstructions in this fluid. So he developed a method to manipulate it. And in his Paris clinic, patients gathered around a large oak tub filled with iron filings, glass, and magnetized water. Iron rods protruded from the tub. Patients pressed the rods against their affected body parts, and Mesmer walked through the room in a silk robe, touching patients with a magnetized iron wand. Subjects fell into violent, convulsive trance states, and when they woke up, they claimed to be cured. Mesmer called this state the crisis state. An impressive spectacle. So in 1784, King Louis XVI convened a royal commission to investigate the practice. The panel included Benjamin Franklin and the chemist Antoine Lavoisier.
Yeah.
They performed blindfolded tests on Mesmer's patients, and the commission concluded that the magnetic fluid didn't exist. They determined that the trance states and convulsions were generated entirely by the imagination and susceptibility of the subjects.
It was worth a shot. I like the way he's thinking.
Didn't deter him. Mainstream science rejected Mesmer, so he immediately integrated his practice into the esoteric underground, and he founded the Society of Harmony in Paris. It was structured as a secret society, complete with tiered degrees and initiation oaths and secret archives. One of Mesmer's disciples in this group, the Marquis de Poissy, I don't know, I'm sick of pronouncing this French fucking names. Some French Marquis advanced the technique. He abandoned the violent convulsions and the iron tubs, and he instead used verbal commands and hand passes to induce deep sleep-like trance in his subjects, a state he termed magnetic somnambulism.
So he's a hypnotist.
Yes. Whilst in this trance, subjects exhibited altered personalities, diagnosed their own illnesses, and claimed to communicate with entities.
Ugh.
By the turn of the 19th century in Europe, animal magnetism had merged with Rosicrucian alchemy and Kabbalah. The European esoteric lodges absorbed the practice and provided a secular procedural framework for accessing the unconscious mind and the invisible world. And the occult underground now possessed a method to induce altered states of consciousness on command. But it wouldn't be exclusively theirs for long. In 1784, following the Royal Commission and undeterred by its results, a member of Mesmer's Society of Harmony, Marquis de Lafayette, which was a guy I'm pretty sure we mentioned him in the Saint Germain episode a bunch, he wrote a letter to George Washington touting Mesmer's grand philosophical discovery and announcing to Mr. Washington that he was bringing the secret of Mesmer to America. He moved over to America and went straight to the American Philosophical Society, which is America's answer to the Royal Society, in Pennsylvania, where he started giving talks on mesmerism to key figures in the American university and scientific world.
God, these poor guys back then, like they've got so much going on already. They don't have, any of the advantage of our science. And they got these guys coming with these crazy ideas. And Washington's got to go, fucking, what? I'm trying to be the first president of this country.
Well,
coming to me with magic. Is magic real? What are we talking about?
You'd think like, okay, yeah, great. Cool. So what are we going to do with it, right?
Mm.
And I think I know what they did with it. But I'm going to say, this is... I'm not sure if this is like a thing. I'm just going to put a asterisks among this next section to just say, like, this is my idea. So take it with a grain of salt, but I think they did something with it. Lexington, Kentucky at this time was the center of a massive pro-French, pro-Enlightenment intellectual movement. And the center of this was the Transylvania University. In 1797, this university employed a member of the American Philosophical Society, a prominent Freemason from Lexington Lodge No. 1, and a pioneer in experimental sciences, a student of the French sciences of Mesmer, called Dr. Samuel Brown.
Brown or Brenner?
Brown, like the color.
Brown.
He was, but he was like hardly alone in his knowledge of the techniques of Mesmer in Lexington. Lexington was crawling with French expats, like former military officers, scientists, teachers, Jacobins, all would have been familiar with Mesmer's work in France. Kentucky.
He's down in Kentucky, did you say?
Yeah. I didn't realize how French Kentucky is, but...
Oh, you got Louisiana down there, don't you?
Well, they got Paris, Versailles, Bourbon County.
Yeah, but I mean...
But yes.
Like Louisiana is famously French.
So, in the late 1790s, at the same time, the Second Great Awakening began as a series of Protestant religious revivals that moved across the American frontier.
Yeah.
In August 1801, this movement reached a peak at the Cane Ridge Revival in Bourbon County, Kentucky, about 15 k's from Paris. An estimated 18 to 25,000 people gathered in a clearing centered on a Presbyterian meeting house, while multiple preachers from various denominations delivered simultaneous sermons from wagons and tree stumps to the assembled crowd. So what I'm trying to point out is that it can't be a coincidence that this exact spot, Cane Ridge in Bourbon County, Kentucky, is where participants began to exhibit involuntary physical reactions that became known as the religious exercises. The most prevalent was the falling exercise, where hundreds of individuals collapsed simultaneously into a catatonic trance that lasted for several hours. Others exhibited the jerks, characterized by rhythmic, violent spasms of the head and limbs. Some groups engaged in the barking exercises, making guttural vocalizations while moving on all fours, and the dancing exercise, which involved repetitive circular movements until the subject reached total exhaustion. These behaviors were practically identical to the crisis states documented by Franz Anton Mesmer 2 decades earlier. The conditions at Cane Ridge, prolonged sleep deprivation, high volume rhythmic chanting, and intense emotional suggestion functioned as the system of mass induction. So while Mesmer attributed these states to the realignment of a universal magnetic fluid, the American revivalists attributed them to the descent of the Holy Spirit. Both systems utilize the same mechanisms to bypass the conscious mind and trigger autonomic nervous system responses in large groups of people.
It's a real thing, this mass psychosis, whatever you call it.
It's a crisis state indeed. And the other thing, not a completely new occult science, but a revived occult science, also came about at this time. Because in the 1780s, as we covered last time, Alessandro Cagliostro incorporated scrying into the highest degrees of his Egyptian rite of Freemasonry. Speaking to the angels that John Dee and Edward Kelly were doing in the 1500s.
Ah, right. Okay, yep.
But Cagliostro placed a prepubescent child before a crystal globe or a bowl of water, performed a ritual invocation, and the child then would report seeing visions and receiving direct messages from entities. The lodge ritual quickly merged with the clinical application of magnetic somnambulism. Mesmeric operators observed the entranced subjects routinely claimed to possess clairvoyant sight and the ability to speak with the dead. So the medical procedure evolved into a technology for spiritual communication. And later on in 1829 in Germany, the physician Justinus Kammer published a detailed study on his patient, Friedrich Horf, known as the Seeress of Pavost. Whilst held in a state of continuous mesmeric trance, he produced complex esoteric diagrams. He spoke a completely unknown language and delivered theological discourses dictated by spirits. She. Her case formalized transmediumship within the German intellectual and esoteric networks, and this practice crossed the Atlantic. In 1844, an American shoemaker named Andrew Jackson Davis was placed into a mesmeric trance, and while unconscious, he dictated a 782-page philosophical treatise detailing the structure of the universe, heavily incorporating the theology of Emanuel Swedenborg.
How do you go?
No, like really good. He became known as the Poughkeepsie Seer. Proved to these people that uneducated individuals could produce vast volumes of esoteric literature whilst operating in an altered state.
What was his name again?
Andrew Jackson Davis.
Andrew Jackson Davis.
4 years later, in 1848, the Fox sisters in Hydesville, New York, reported communicating with an invisible entity through a series of audible knocks in their home. They established a system to ask questions and receive answers via a tapping code. This practice spread rapidly across the Western world, and it marked the formal beginning of modern spiritualism.
Okay.
And these became the pillars of the occult toolkit of the 19th century. Swedenborg's cosmology, Mesmer's trance mechanism, tarot as the visual and archetypical map, and trance mediumship and spiritualism as the communication channel with the other side. This was everything they needed to bypass orthodox religion completely. And with all this, the European Lodge system had the tools required to engineer an entirely new spiritual framework. The center of their operations shifted from the crushed French aristocracy to the rising financial hub of Frankfurt in Germany.
No, I thought you were going to say America.
Not yet. So a quick refresher on some territory covered previously to get us up to speed with this next group. In the mid-1600s, a man named Sabbatai Zevi was declared the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. His movement was massive news across the entirety of Europe, mostly amongst the Jewish communities, but not exclusively. And then in 1666, he went to Constantinople to confront the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, where rather than fight him to death or whatever they expected him to do, he instead took the knee and converted to Islam. His PR guy, a man called Nathan of Gaza, spun this as the ultimate boss move, where Zevi had in fact converted to Islam to destroy it from the inside. Thousands of his followers, the Sabbatians, moved to Turkey and followed him into Islam.
Yeah.
These guys worked their way into the upper echelons of Ottoman society, all while continuing to secretly adhere to the Sabbatian ideology behind closed doors. And then in Poland, in the 1750s, about a century after Zevi, a man called Jacob Frank basically took a leaf out of Muhammad's book, took the existing underground network of Zevi's followers throughout Eastern Europe and declared to them that Zevi had been the first stage of the Messianic revelation and that he, Jacob Frank, was the second and final stage.
Totally.
Frank claimed that the soul of the Messiah had transmigrated from Zevi into him. And while Zevi had adopted the mask of Islam, Frank and his followers adopted the mask of Roman Catholicism. In 1759, Jacob Frank led a mass conversion of thousands of his followers in Poland. These Frankists became a distinct social and political class, outwardly Catholic aristocrats who privately practiced a ritual system based on the total violation of traditional Jewish and Christian morality. Frank replaced Zevi's focus on spiritual liberation with a focus on terrestrial power. He taught that the way to life required passing through every religion and every law until they were all destroyed.
Jeez.
This provided the theological justification for the systematic infiltration of the Masonic lodges, particularly the Templar rite of strict observance. Jacob Frank died on December 10, 1791 in Offenbach in Germany. Frank had relocated his court from Brno to Offenbach, and he took up residence in the Istenburg Palace and assumed the title Baron of Offenbach. He maintained a lavish lifestyle supported by a continuous stream of financial contributions from Frankist families in Poland, Bohemia, and Moravia. His court included a private guard and hundreds of permanent residents. Moses Dubroska was born in 1753 into a Moravian family that financed the Sabbatai Frankist movement. His mother, Skondel Dubroska, held the imperial tobacco monopoly and was the first cousin of the cult leader, Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank used their estate as his operational base and publicly identified Moses as his nephew, even though he was his second cousin. Dobruschka converted to Catholicism with the rest of them and assumed the title Baron Thomas von Schofield. He entered the German Masonic network with the objective of integrating Frankist theology into the lodge system. And in 1780, Dobruschka partnered with Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel and the Count of Saint-Germain, amongst a couple others, to found the Asiatic Brethren. Saint-Germain provided the Rosicrucian lineage and the alchemical framework for the order. Dobruschka served as the theological architect. He supplied the group with Kabbalistic and Sabbatean texts that he had inherited and or translated. The Asiatic Brethren functioned as a laboratory for the engineering of a new universal religion. The name of the organization was the Order of the Knights and Brothers of St. John the Evangelist from Asia in Europe. And the title says it all, really. Usually when an order is named St. John, it is in reference to John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. But St. John the Evangelist is not John the Baptist. St. John the Evangelist is John of Patmos, the author of the Book of Revelation.
Right.
In the Book of Revelation, he addressed his visions to the 7 churches of Asia.
Yes.
So these guys opposed the Orthodox Church of Peter in Rome. And so by adopting this name, the founders are signaling their intent to execute the apocalyptic prophecies. They plan to demolish the old world order and establish a new society based on their doctrine. The founders engineered the framework for a new universal religion. They synthesized Jewish Kabbalah, Christian mysticism, and Islamic Hermeticism. Ephraim Joseph Hirschfeld, a Jewish Kabbalist working alongside Dobruschka and Charles of Hesse-Kassel, who, I'll just add for anyone who tries to do further research on this, Charles is also, he's called by a bunch of different names. Karl of Hesse-Kassel or Karl von Hesse is also Charles of Hesse-Kassel. Can be confusing if you're trying to research this. But they all like that guy, Ephraim Joseph Hirschfeld, he documented this whole thing. So I'm not supposing this at all. This is like documented their fucking goals. The rituals of the order were specifically made to dissolve the boundaries of the traditional Abrahamic faiths. And the resulting system was designed to serve as a singular global spiritual framework for the new age. Dobruschka integrated the Frankist doctrine of redemption through sin into the Masonic degrees. Jacob Frank taught that the violation of religious law was necessary to transition into a new spiritual era. So the Asiatic Brethren operationalized this by requiring their Jewish members to consume pork cooked in milk during lodge banquets to directly, violate Jewish dietary law. And the Count of Saint-Germain remained the senior adept of this network until his death in February 1784. Just FYI. They replaced external religious authority with an internal esoteric system managed by the order. As we went over previously, the Asiatic Brethren harbored the membership of the Illuminati after they were dissolved in Bavaria and at the 1782 convent of Wilhelmsbad. These groups merged with the Templar Rite of Freemasonry, or at least the upper echelons of it, which was then followed by a whole string of revolutionary activity. In 1787, a German scholar and Freemason published a book titled Authentic News of the Knights and Brothers Initiated from Asia. This was based around some leaked documents he'd obtained from disgruntled members of the order. And in it, he claimed the order was fraudulent and set up as a scam to steal money from wealthy recruits. He specifically attacked the Jewish members. This publication alerted the broader Masonic world and the German authorities to the order's existence. And the German Freemasons weren't happy to find out about this lodge mixing Jews with Christians. And as a result, the Christian membership in the northern lodges of Hamburg and Schleswig demanded the removal of Jews from the primary degrees of the order.
It begins.
Yeah. To preserve the organization, Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel proposed a compromise where they segregate the membership into 2 distinct tracks, the St. John lodges for Christians and the Melchizedek lodges for Jews.
Melchizedek, hey? You know who that is?
No, I've been meaning to look it up, but I just haven't actually done it. But I'm familiar with the word.
He's a guy who appears early on in Genesis out of nowhere. Like when Abraham's talking to God, it's like, and then Melchizedek comes along and gave 10% of his stuff to Abraham, and he was like this high priest of some other temple thing.
Right.
So
okay.
it raises a lot of very interesting questions. It's one of the more interesting parts of the Bible.
The Jewish members considered this a betrayal of the order's foundational principle of syncretism. They refused to accept the compromise, and they withdrew their financial and intellectual support. The governing body fractured as the wealthy Jewish families in Vienna and Berlin liquidated their ties to the order, and the group ceased to exist. The traditional lodges of Germany refused to authorize the founding of a new lodge if it was to allow Jews.
Ugh.
And in 1792, Moses Dubrochka moved to Paris to participate in the French Revolution. He changed his name to Junius Frey, and he became a member of the Jacobins. En route to Paris, he stopped in Strasbourg and held a meeting with Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin. Saint-Martin was a French mystic and the founder of the Martinists, his own Masonic order. Moses Dubrochka was executed by the guillotine in the 1794 Reign of Terror.
Oh, he fucked that up.
Yeah.
Should have stayed away, mate.
He should have. But in the year 1800, Saint Martin published a book in Paris titled L'Aurora Nascente. I don't know. Translates to The Nascent Dawn. He published this under the pseudonym Le Philosophe Inconnu. Is that like the secret philosopher, some shit? The book was
unknown, yeah.
Yeah, the unknown philosopher. The book was not his original work. It was a French translation of a 17th century book written by the German mystic Jacob Boehme. The text detailed spiritual alchemy, the cosmological friction between light and dark, and the transmutation of the human soul. Essentially, it was a proposal for a new universal religion. In 1807, the French military occupied Frankfurt. The old German social restrictions were suspended under Napoleonic law. So a clerk for the House of Rothschild named Sigmund Geisenheimer, he was basically Meyer Amschel Rothschild's number two. He utilized this suspension of the social restrictions to establish a new Masonic lodge, and he named it L'Aurore Nascente. He named it the Nascent Dawn.
Right.
In mainstream German Freemasonry still strictly banned Jewish members. The established German lodges labeled this new group the Juden Lodge. Geisenheimer built the lodge to bypass this embargo, and he recruited the Jewish banking families of Frankfurt. The lodge roster included the Goldschmidts, the Spires, the Adlers, there's a couple other key families whose names I didn't write down there as well, but we'll get to them at some point, I guess. We'll say amongst others. And then in June 1809, Solomon Meyer Rothschild was officially initiated. The founders required Christian members in order to legitimize their universal framework. So they recruited Franz Joseph Molitor, a Christian Kabbalist, and Molitor served as the intellectual architect and later the master of the lodge. They provided the theological structure, fusing Jewish Kabbalah with Christian mysticism to continue the engineering of the universal religion. The traditional
universal religion. I mean, isn't Christianity supposed to be like a universal religion? Isn't that like, aren't all religions supposed to be?
Yeah, but like, I guess it's like, you know, the Jews don't want to become Christians, and the Christians don't want to become Jews, and they're...
Oh, so it's a way of reconciling that tension.
Yeah, it's a way... So, I've got, like, what's going on here and it is essentially a fight for equality. But equality for themselves. You know, there's a lot of these Jewish... a lot of these, especially in that area, a lot of these wealthy Jewish families were like, you know, running the slave trade. So not full equality, but like, you know, equality for Jews.
Sure.
And, you know, fair enough, because they were not looked at as equals by the very, very Christian Europe. So the traditional German lodges attempted to shut down the Nascent Dawn. Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel stepped in, and the former patron of Saint Germain and Grand Master of the Templar Rite of Strict Observance and the Asiatic Brethren took the Nascent Dawn under his official protection, granted them a formal Masonic patent. He sealed the document with his Grand Master's emblem, which became the emblem of the Nascent Dawn, which was a swastika placed alongside the Star of David. It was taken from, there's actually archaeological sites in the Middle East that feature these two symbols. That's where he got this. That's where they got it from.
How interesting.
Yeah. Following Napoleon's military campaigns, the esoteric underground expanded Cagliostro's original Egyptian rite. In 1805, the rite of Mizraim was formalized in Italy. It was propagated by the Biederite brothers, Jewish officers serving in the French army. They integrated Kabbalah and Egyptian Hermeticism into this 90-degree Masonic system. It's way extra. And in 1814, they established the Supreme Council of Mizraim in Paris. In the following year, the Rite of Memphis was formed, further expanding the Egyptian Masonic structure. And remember, a reminder from last time, these Egyptian lodges are they're part of Freemasonry, but they're like, you know, they're free. They call themselves a free Masonic rite, but like they're not considered part of like general Freemasonry. They don't recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
These rites operated in parallel with the Frankfurt Nascent Dawn, and both networks utilized the Napoleonic political shield to synthesize Jewish mysticism with European occultism. And in June 1815, the British and Prussian armies defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. The French military shield across Europe collapsed. The traditional German Masons immediately moved to crush the Frankfurt Nascent Dawn. The lodge required a new sovereign protector. So in May 1817, Karl Leopold Goldschmidt secured an official Masonic charter from Prince Augustus Frederick, the Duke of Sussex, and the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. The Rothschilds and the Frankfurt Kabbalists were officially integrated into the British Masonic establishment, giving their order full legitimacy. And whilst this continental lodges engineered this esoteric syncretism, the British network engineered an eschatological framework. The Duke of Sussex served as the primary patron for the London Society for Promoting Christianity Amongst Jews. This organisation was financed by the British banker Henry Drummond. And in 1826, Drummond convened a group of theologians, military officers, and political elites at his estate for the Albury Conference. The Albury prophets established the doctrine of Christian Zionism. They determined that the British Empire possessed a divine mandate to relocate the Jewish diaspora to Palestine.
The fucking... the arrogance of these.
Yeah. And we went over this in more detail.
It's our job to do this.
Yeah, exactly. We went over this in more detail in the episode that preceded this series, the staging the
seeding the eschaton.
Seeding the eschaton, yes.
Yes.
We went into the Albury conference, but yeah, you know, it's like all like John Nelson Darby and the Schofield Reference Bible and stuff all comes from this this conference in Albury.
Oh, yeah.
So the mass relocation was engineered to fulfill the prophecy of the Book of Revelation and trigger the apocalypse.
Jesus fucking Christ. I really hate how significant that is in global, like, geopolitics today.
Yeah.
It feels upsettingly silly.
Yes. Yes, it does. And so, whilst the Frankfurt banking lodges secured the capital and social emancipation of European Jews, the Albury network provided the simultaneous theological mechanism to move them to the Middle East. The Rite of Mizraim and the Rite of Memphis provided the structures required for high-level compartmentalization. And this structure allowed these lodges to function as the command and control centers for decentralized insurgencies. 1820 and 1821 saw the Carbonari revolts in Italy and Spain. The Carbonari was essentially the Italian Illuminati. They used the same structure of their society that basically was just like, we're that, you know? I don't think that they were like, it was like set up by Adam Weishaupt or whatever, but it was like they saw what the Illuminati had done and they did it in Italy. It became, but this was all coordinated through these Egyptian lodges. And so, the Carbonari is a secret revolutionary society dedicated to the unification of Italy and the destruction of papal authority. And in 1820, they launched armed uprisings in Naples and Piedmont.
Fuck.
The Betterite brothers, who controlled the Supreme Council of the Rite of Mizraim in Paris, they served as the primary conduits for the movement. And the Mizraim lodges provided the Carbonari with a secret communication network, encrypted communication network, and a tiered membership system. In Naples, the revolutionary leadership utilized the Philadelphia lodges, another specific branch of the Egyptian Rite, to coordinate military defections. And in 1830, the July Revolution kicked off in France. It was a 3-day insurrection in Paris that overthrew King Charles X, the final Bourbon monarch. The revolution was directed by the Orleanist faction, which sought to place Louis Philippe, the Duke of Orleans, on the throne. The Marquis de Lafayette, who we mentioned earlier, veteran of the American and French revolutions, he commanded the National Guard during the uprising. He held a high-ranking honorary position within the Egyptian rites. The Lodge of the Rite of Mizraim in Paris functioned as the recruitment hubs for student groups and paramilitary units that manned the barricades. The result was the installation of the Citizen King, the son of the previous Grand Master of French Freemasonry, who had financed the original 1789 revolution. The Duke of Orleans that got the guillotine. We mentioned him last time. And then in 1831 was the rise of Young Italy. Following the failure of the 1820 revolts, Giuseppe Mazzini established Young Italy. Mazzini was an initiated Carbonaro and a high-ranking member of the Rite of Mizraim. Mazzini determined that the previous decentralized model was insufficient. He utilized the Egyptian Rite's international infrastructure to expand his network into Young Europe. This created a transnational revolutionary cadre across Poland, Germany, and Switzerland. And his doctrine explicitly linked political republicanism with the esoteric universal religion framework, viewing the destruction of the papacy as a spiritual necessity for the new age. And then 1848 was the springtime of nations, a simultaneous wave of revolutions that erupted across France, Italy, Germany, and the Austrian Empire. This period marked the peak of the Egyptian Rite political activity. In France, the February Revolution established the Second Republic. The provisional government included prominent members of the Rite of Memphis, such as Louis Blanc and Alessandre Ledru-Rollin. Under their influence, the government adopted the social and political symbols of the radical Masonic underground. In Italy, Giuseppe Garibaldi led the military defense of the Roman Republic against the French and Austrian armies. Garibaldi was a 33rd degree Mason and would eventually become the Grand Master of both the Rite of Memphis and the Rite of Mizraim. He utilized the Egyptian lodges as the logistical backbone for his red shirt volunteers. But following the military suppression of the 1848 revolutions by the Austrian and Russian empires, thousands of these combat-hardened operatives, members of the Carbonari, Young Italy, and the Egyptian Rites, fled Europe and essentially went into exile. In England, rather than people trying to shrink the authority of England, they were greatly expanding. Edward Bulwer-Lytton entered the British Parliament in 1831. During this period, he operated within the London social and Masonic circles directed by Prince Augustus Frederick, the Duke of Sussex. we mentioned earlier, the one that gave the authority for the Nascent Dawn. The Duke served as the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, and through this administrative link, the internal history of the Hessian and Frankfurt esoteric networks was available to the British political elite. In 1831, he left Parliament to travel and focus on his writing. Sorry, I said he entered Parliament in 1831. He entered Parliament in the 1820s. Bulwer-Lytton was a fluent Francophile, and he got his hands on the literary forgeries that used the existing 18th century rumours of the Count of Saint-Germain that portrayed the Count as an immortal prophet who attempted to warn the French monarchy before the Revolution. Then in 1838, Bulwer-Lytton published a serialized story called Zevi in the Monthly Chronicle. The narrative featured a protagonist who was suspiciously similar to the Count of Saint-Germain. And then in 1842, Bulwer-Lytton published his extremely influential novel, Zanoni. His narrative is set during the French Revolution, and the character, Zanoni, is an immortal Rosicrucian who possesses a diamond fortune, speaks all languages, and maintains a state of chemical enhancement via an alchemical elixir. Another character, Menjur, represents the cold, intellectual, and scientific wing of the order. And the name Menjur is a linguistic derivative used to reference the Nascent Dawn network, specifically the Mendelssohn and Molitor families. Bulwer-Lytton's works were well known in his time. He coined famous phrases like the pursuit of the almighty dollar, the pen is mightier than the sword, the great unwashed, and the timeless opening phrase, it was a dark and stormy night.
Really?
In more recent times, his work inspired the Bulwer-Lytton fiction contests held annually from 1982 to 2024, which claim to seek the worst possible opening sentence of all novels.
I bet there's some good ones.
Yeah, Zanoni was wildly popular, and it did a lot. It introduced the British elite to the concept of the Superior Council, a hidden group of immortal masters directing the course of human history.
There we go.
Yeah, the book popularized the idea that political revolutions and financial shifts were the outward manifestation of a secret alchemical process. This literature shifted the perception of the 1789 bloodbath of the French Revolution from a chaotic uprising into a necessary engineered stage of human evolution. This book single-handedly sparked the 19th century English occult revival, reviving the Rosicrucian in England and sparking the new Rosicrucian society, the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. But most importantly, this book introduced a psychological gatekeeping mechanism called the dweller on the threshold. In the lore of this text, any initiate attempting to cross from normal human consciousness into enlightened awareness is blocked by a terrifying entity. The dweller is not a demon, but a manifestation of the initiate's own ego, their accumulated sins, and their deepest subconscious fears. To pass through, the initiate must face this terror without flinching, resulting in the destruction of the ego. Faltering results in permanent insanity. Stripped of its 19th century esoteric dressing, the concept is the clinical application of aggressive behavioral psychology. Decades before modern psychology defined the shadow, Bulwer-Lytton codified a system of trauma bonding for the ruling class. I mean, technically the Jesuits did, because it is basically the Jesuit initiation. But anyway, the concept framed severe psychological terror and mental breakdown as a mandatory spiritual milestone. And this solved a problem for the esoteric network. This gave them a way to break down a human mind to a blank slate without the subject resisting. If an initiate believes that enduring extreme psychological stress is the only path to becoming an enlightened master, they will actively submit to the process. It provided the operational justification for the ritualized blackmail, hazing, and mental conditioning utilized by secret societies and eventually 20th century intelligence agencies.
And fraternity houses and sorority houses at American colleges.
Yep. The dweller became the standard protocol for ensuring loyalty. But it also established a conceptual framework that later occultists would scale from the individual to the entire globe, using it to frame catastrophic societal collapse and world war as necessary planetary initiations. And throughout all of this, the Nascent Dawn network, and specifically the Rothschilds at the top, went from a somewhat obscure, or an obscure, Jewish family that dabbled in finances. Maya Amstel Rothschild started working for Charles of Hesse-Kassel's brother, Wilhelm.
Mm-hmm.
And he was managing the flow of Hessian mercenaries, which they were hiring to the British to fight the American Revolution. That was the base of the Rothschild money. He made a lot of money off that. He sent his sons throughout Europe to start banking houses. And I mean, what they achieved in that following 50 years and beyond is remarkable. But the United States successfully severed most ties with the British following the Revolution, but not all ties. And in 1811, the United States Congress allowed the charter for the First Bank of the United States to expire. This effectively severed the new republic from the transnational central banking apparatus managed out of the City of London. The following year, the War of 1812 began. On paper and in many respects, it was a conflict over maritime rights and border expansion. However, in hindsight, it served as a mechanism for financial recapture. In August 1814, British forces marched into Washington, D.C. They set fire to the Capitol, the President's house, and the Treasury. The destruction of the Capitol didn't end the American project, obviously, but the staggering cost of the war drove the US government into crippling debt, and it also forced them to paint the President's house white. To stabilize the ruined economy, Congress was forced to capitulate, and in 1816 they chartered the Second Bank of the United States. This new institution was modelled entirely on the Bank of England, which was run by the Rothschilds, or London Rothschilds. But what this means is that it was a private-public partnership. The government owned 20%, and the other 80% was owned by private investors. Approximately 1/3 of that stock was then purchased by European and British investors, reintegrating the American economy directly back into the European financial grid. On top of this, because America was bankrupt, the US government had to issue bonds to get money. Those bonds were then sold by the bank to the banking houses of London and Paris, and the majority of these bonds were purchased by the Rothschilds. It's also tethered the American dollar to interest rates set by London. This was followed by Waterloo in 1815, where the London Rothschilds essentially bought a majority stake of Britain's debt. But this was just the beginning. In 1821, the Carbonari launched their armed uprising in the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, utilizing the right of Mizraim to mobilize military units. The Austrian Empire deployed its army south to crush the revolution. To finance this military operation, the Austrian government and the restored monarchy contracted massive sovereign loans from the House of Rothschild. Karl von Rothschild relocated to Naples to manage the capital transfers. He established the fifth Rothschild banking house in Naples, securing a monopoly over the debt and sovereign treasury of the Two Sicilies. 2 years later, in 1823, a crisis unfolded in Spain following the Carbonari-linked liberal revolts. King Louis XVIII of France dispatched an army to restore the Spanish monarchy. James de Rothschild in Paris financed the French military campaign through state bond issues.
Class solidarity, man.
In July 1830, the Egyptian Right Network in Paris facilitated the revolution that overthrew King Charles X and installed the Duke of Orleans. Following this, James de Rothschild became the primary financial consultant to the French government. He secured the exclusive rights to underwrite the French national debt and received the state concessions to construct the principal French railway lines. But during these revolutions, the Nascent Dawn network also underwrote the purchase of military-grade muskets and pistols from the manufacturers to the revolutionaries. In the 1830s, saw a transition to percussion firearms a more modernized weapon. These guns required mercury fulminate in order to create an explosion to fire the weapon. In 1835, in return for the capital required to quash the rebellion, the Spanish crown granted the House of Rothschild the exclusive lease to the Almaden mercury mines, the largest and most productive mercury mines in the world. It also gave them control of lead mining operations in the regions of Mazaron and Adra, which became the largest lead producer in the world.
Okay.
The logistical infrastructure of the Nascent Dawn network moved these materials across Europe. Lead ingots and finished ammunition were transported via the same maritime and overland routes used to move the network's intelligence and financial instruments. And by 1848, by the start of the Spring of Nations, the revolutionary lodges in Paris, Vienna, and Milan received their ammunition supplies through these established channels.
You know much about mercury mining?
No.
It's a liquid, right?
Yeah, I don't get it.
So how do you mine mercury?
I don't know. Probably the same way you mine oil. In 1848, the wave of revolutions organized through the Egyptian rites hit the Austrian Empire, triggering armed conflicts in Vienna, Prague, and Hungary. The Habsburg monarchy faced bankruptcy and military collapse. Salomon Rothschild underwrote the massive state debt required to fund the counterinsurgency. Following the suppression of the revolts, the Rothschild network consolidated its control over the Austrian financial system, eventually establishing the Creditanstalt and securing state-backed transport and mining concessions across Central Europe. The network provided the capital to purchase the firearms. They controlled the mercury required for the percussion caps to ignite the power. They controlled the lead required for the bullets. They controlled the distribution network to get the weapons and ammunition to the radicals. Each wave of this political instability created an immediate sovereign debt crisis. The monarchies are forced to issue massive loans to fund their military forces, and the network provided this capital to them. And finally, just like that, a group of occultists achieved the millennia-long alchemical quest to convert lead into gold.
Well, I figured out how you get mercury. If you're
how do you do it?
It's in a rock called cinnabar, and they break that rock up and then chuck it in a furnace, and that creates a sulfur gas, and then they put that through cooling pipes and distill it into the liquid mercury.
Right.
So pretty intense.
Yeah, and like it's like just toxic to be around, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll fuck you up.
Yeah. I'm sure they were never anywhere near it themselves. So they got the gold. But what about silver?
Yes, what about silver?
During this same time period, the British Empire faced a severe trade deficit with China. The Chinese government restricted foreign trade to the port of Canton. They demanded payment for tea and silk exclusively in silver, and they were bleeding the British coffers dry. So, to reverse the flow of silver, British and European merchant houses introduced industrial quantities of Indian opium into the Chinese domestic market. In 1832, David Sassoon...
Very naughty.
Yeah, very naughty. A Baghdadi Jewish merchant, he relocated his operations to Bombay and established the House of Sassoon. He secured a monopoly on the production and export of Indian opium. The Sassoon family was in a financial partnership with the House of Rothschild. The Rothschild provided the international credit lines, and they managed the physical bullion transfers required. The extracted Chinese silver flowed directly into the London and Frankfurt banking hubs. This capital provided the liquid reserves for the Nascent Dawn network's industrial investments, mining across Europe. And the United States participated in this dirty business through Russell and Company. Samuel Russell established the firm in Canton in 1824. He generated a massive fortune by smuggling Turkish and Indian opium into China. In 1831, his cousin William Huntington Russell, a student at Yale University, he traveled to Germany. During his studies, Russell was initiated into a secret society, German secret society, called the Eulogian Club. This group operated under the exact same protocols as the 18th century Bavarian Illuminati. The primary symbol of the Eulogian Club was the owl of Minerva, the same owl used by Adam Weishaupt as the symbol of the Illuminati. And also, this German network was managed by the successors of the House of Hesse-Kassel. In 1832, William Huntington Russell returned to Yale and established the American chapter of the German Society. He named it the Brotherhood of Death, later formalized as Skull and Bones, or Order 322. The organization functioned as a recruitment and training node for the American ruling class. The financial foundation of the order was the Russell Trust Association, the trust filled by the proceeds of the Russell and Company's Chinese opium trade. The order utilized rituals centered on a windowless facility called the Tomb. They adopted the death head iconography, characteristic of the same Hessian and Frankist occult networks in Europe. In 1839, the Emperor of China ordered the eradication of the opium trade. Chinese authorities seized and destroyed 20,000 chests of Sassoon and Russell opium. The British government deployed its naval fleet to protect the merchant houses, and this initiated the First Opium War. In 1842, the British military defeated the Chinese. The two nations signed the Treaty of Nanking. The treaty forced China to open 5 ports to unrestricted foreign trade, forced the Chinese government to pay a massive indemnity in silver, and it ceded the island of Hong Kong to the British Empire. The Opium War secured the permanent flow of Chinese silver into the London and Frankfurt markets. Through Skull and Bones, the junior executives of the American merchant class were formally initiated into the exact same esoteric and financial framework centered around the European Nascent Dawn. And that takes us up to about 1850.
Okay.
We shall leave it there for today.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that the Skull and Bones were like a real thing. I thought they were just like a university club.
Yeah, Yale University, but it's...
Yeah, I didn't realize they actually had their hands in all this business.
Well, like, you know, the Illuminati was a university club, you know? Like, it's where you get, you know, it's where you can get the key figures early before they have a career that they want to protect by not joining your secret society.
I guess what I mean is I didn't think their influence extended beyond the university. I thought they were just like a...
Well, neither did I.
Play ping pong or something.
No. Well, no. I mean, you know, fast forward to like the year, was it 2004 with like John Kerry and George Bush in the election?
Yeah.
Both Skull and Bones members.
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yeah.
The Society of Death, huh?
The Society of Death.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
settle down.
I mean, Bush
lives up to that.
Yeah, lived up to that name.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a pretty good rundown of all these bloody networks and whatnot and what's going on.
Yeah,
it's funny how it does come down to the nuts and bolts of the logistics of mining and extracting lead, you know, and then using that. Yeah.
And look, I think this was, I mean, this is my opinion, but I think the way that the Rothschilds turned lead into gold, you know, I think that sort of set a new way of thinking about the occult writings, you know, in that, or maybe it doesn't mean exactly what, maybe it's not, you can't turn lead into gold, but you can turn lead into gold by selling lead. you know, it's like
Lang Hancock turned iron into gold.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. We figured it out finally. Commerce.
Yeah. And then they
that's the most powerful.
And then they took the gold away. And then they took the gold away, and they just made it a fucking number that people agree is worth something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Turned gold into whatever.
All these mystical motherfuckers.
Yeah. I don't know how, like, into the occult. These banking. Well, actually, no, I do know. Look, banks, like banking and the occult seem to go hand in hand.
How so?
Essentially, like fiat currency is like an egregore, It's like a fucking...
Oh, sure, yeah, we've got these bits of paper to which we ascribe meaning.
Yeah.
It's a magical spell. There's a lot of power, People do kill each other over it.
And like, for example, like Andrew Carnegie, who moved to America and was like the patriarch of the Carnegie, Gulf Oil and Carnegie Mellon Bank and stuff. He was a student of Emanuel Swedenborg.
No way.
Yeah. So like banking, especially like the big bankers, like the head guys, seem to go hand in hand.
I really do feel like brains and consciousness is like this incredible tool which we were given well before we had the responsibility to be able to handle it properly, So like around this time, got all these great ideas and all this, and it's still this, people are doing wonderful things with their minds. And it's just not quite the discipline that one would hope for.
Yeah, and it's becoming apparent to me, and I'm probably like, in the research that I'm doing for this whole thing, I'm probably about 100 years ahead of wherever we are at any given point. And, it's becoming apparent to me that, like, everything that we consider normal in the modern world that's been like an advancement in technology, it's all gone through this filter of these secret societies in its inception,
Yeah.
From, like, TV. You look at like Hollywood is essentially like America's go at creating, the pillars of Plato and Homer.
Sure. Storytelling.
And I think there's something there with storytelling, with writing stories down. That's just kind of my biggest takeaway is like, well, the magic that seems to happen comes from people writing a fictional story and then people picking it up and turning it into reality. And that's how this whole thing happened. This is Francis Bacon writing Plato, come doing the allegory of Atlantis, and then Francis Bacon taking that fictional idea and writing a fictional novel, and it just spawned all this fucking scientific and occult societies.
Let's not forget the Torah, the Pentateuch,
the
Old Testament.
Obviously the religious writing is there, and the Hermetic stuff obviously is the crux of it all. But there's something to be said there about like a spell and writing the thing.
Yeah, they are literally spells.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
That's why they call it spelling, man, because you got to spell the words.
Yeah. I wanted to say that, but I didn't want to sound like a fucking weird ass fucking internet mystic dude.
One that annoys me is television. Oh, they call it television because it's television, right? Yeah.
Yeah, not quite.
No, it's because tele means distance and vision is it's just like telephone, telegraph, teleport.
You know what? And I haven't never looked into this, so I don't fucking know. I don't know if I'm just like, if this is just like a fucking stoner thought or if this is like substance, but like the word universe, right? It means one song.
Okay, yeah.
And like, the universe is made of frequency. Music is made of frequency. Was that a conscious thing when the word was created? Because I don't think that was known then. And
the universe.
What a fucking happy coincidence for it to make so much sense on an actual like quantum physics level.
No, it's not actually song.
It's not?
No.
Okay, well there you go.
Uni is one, but it comes from verses, which is the past participle of vertere, meaning to turn or to roll.
Okay.
So literally it translates to everything combined or turned into one.
Cool. That's way cooler.
I like the song thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't make sense unless they knew that it was, the frequency was so fundamental, which they wouldn't. At the point that it's a Latin word. So
I think ancient cultures could have conceived of it as a song. I think I could see that happening. You know what I mean?
You're like poetically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
literally. I could see that being in their mythology, the idea that the world is a song.
Well, that is who's sung the world into existence, isn't that that's a mythology? Yeah, it might even be. It might even be
Hindu. I don't know. But yeah, you see what I mean, right? Like you can very easily imagine that. Yeah. Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I didn't know that about the universe. There you go. It's all just rolling together, man.
It's the multiverse now. The universe is old. Old news.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, exactly.
You feel like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of these like tropes that are like maybe the multiverse being one of them, or I mean, there's like there's a good argument to make there for it. I mean, I think like why not? I mean, everything is kind of like fractal. Seems to be like a rule. Why wouldn't there be other universes? Especially since we can see the edge of it. But like, yeah, it always just gets taken too far to the point where it sounds silly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, this happens with a lot of things. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like people ruin things. This is why you need like secret societies full of like intellectuals to like discuss and work on these ideas, because like normal everyday people just fucking run with whatever, go wild with it.
Yeah.
We're going to move next time. We're going to move from this European timeline, and we're going to look at our own neck of the woods.
Over down under.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Because
now we're getting into my territory there.
Yeah, and I mean, I find this stuff so like interesting, and it's so untold. Like it's completely untold. You look up like occult stuff in like early Australia and stuff, and it talks about like witches' marks and like superstitious people moving over from Europe and like putting marks on their doorways to stop spirits from coming in and stuff. But it doesn't mention like the esoteric Freemasonic networks and all this stuff that were active and doing things at the time, and no one talks about any of that.
For sure.
And then like the actual fucking Australia being founded, the guy who wrote the fucking Constitution being a fucking massive theosophist. It's like like I saw
I mean, I've read a lot of Australian history in many different ways, and a cult has basically never come
non-existent.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, looking forward to it. That'll be fun.
I'll mention as well before we go how like obscure this fucking information was that from this episode. Like I thought like like this is like a common conspiracy trope. So the Rothschilds fucking they want to start a new fucking
Freemasons
world religion and whatever, and the Freemasons and stuff, and like but now I had to get French books and put them in fucking Gemini and ask it what it says,
right.
Like
there you go. Well, there's one more resource out there now.
Yeah, if you look up the Nascent Dawn, there's like a video game that's like quite popular. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like all the things in the video game are named after like 18th century occult groups and stuff, and the Nascent Dawn is like a level or something, and so it's all just like gameplay videos and stuff. And like the conspiracy literature, I hate it because it's like it all just comes from this monarchist and Christian lens. It's like this is scary because they want to destroy Christianity, and and it's all just like, oh, this is a big evil, and it's like, well, was it though? Because if it wasn't for these guys doing this, we'd still be living like with the boot of the king on our fucking necks, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we owe these guys a thank you.
Maybe show some fucking respect.
Politely ask them for our gold back as well.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll stop the recording. Bye.
Talk of a political dirt unit.
Is typical